Alright, in this video, we are going to attempt to assemble these 5 pieces into a completed puzzle using assemblies, using a single assembly on Inventor. So I have my assembly active. What I did is on my home screen, clicking on my home, I opened up and just clicked for one click on assembly, and we're ready to go. So what I'm going to use as my guide is the document that I've already established that shows how the puzzle pieces are coming together to be solved in this particular problem. I am going to start with this white piece right here, and I am going to anchor that one in Inventor. That's called grounded, meaning that one's going to stay fixed in that position, and then all the other pieces are going to come towards that one. I'm going to place as many of the pieces, if not all of the pieces, in the exact orientation that they're seen in this image so that we can see how they're coming together in a bit more of a systematic way, because there's a lot of visual 3 dimensions going on here that can be a tad tricky. So let's go to Inventor and bring in our white piece. So you always click on Place to bring in some part in order to do an assembly. My white piece is called White Piece. So I just want to take a look at it and see what orientation it's in now, because if I can stop and think about that, it may give me a chance to reorient that guy before I start my assembly. So here, let's just test this out. So you can tinker with this a little bit, but if you right click, you can rotate about certain axes just to see if we can put it in an orientation that resembles what we're looking at here. So I'm trying to arrive at that orientation, and by doing right clicks and rotating about certain axes, I might be able to accomplish that with a couple of rotations. So it looks like I've arrived at it. Um, that is the orientation I would like my white piece to be in. So I've got my white piece placed in just like the image. So that might take a bit of practice, but worst case scenario, yeah, delete it and you bring it back in, and then you just go right click and see if you can rotate it about an X, Y, or a Z axis to get it into the orientation that you're looking for. All right, that one's placed. I'm going to get that done with grounded. So if I right click, I see a button called grounded. That means that I can no longer rotate or move this piece. Everything else is going to move and come to this piece, so that that's the orientation I'm going to hold fixed, just like the image, to make it less confusing. Let's maybe do one piece at a time to make it less confusing. I'm going to bring in my red piece and try to assemble it so that it slides in where that top square shape right now is going to sit on top of that part of the white. So I'm going to go place again. This time I'm going to try to find in that same, these things all have to be in the same folder. I'm going to try to find my red puzzle piece. So again, in order to place this thing, I'm going to see if I can try this rotation. So let's see, if I rotate this about my x-axis, let's try that and just see what that looks like. I'm going to rotate it about x, so that brings my square block to the top. And now I want to kind of swivel it. I'm rotating it about the z-axis here, so I'm going to try that and just see what happens. And let's try that one more time and see where that brings us to. So if I look at my document and I look at Inventor now, by doing 2 z-axis rotations, I end up with the orientation that I'm looking for. So if I can place it like I see it in this picture, it's going to just make my life a little bit less confusing. So I'm going to take this piece and bring it to the white piece. Now some students will just bring it together and feel like that's an assembly, but an assembly means that you actually do something technical called constraining. And we're going to constrain in 2 different ways. We're going to do a mate and a flush. A mate brings 2 faces together. So if I just said, hey, let's take that face and connect it to that face, they would just slap those 2 faces together. A flush just means I'm going to take a surface and make it align to another surface. So we'll see how that works in practice in a second. So let's try something, and there's a zillion different combinations that you can do to accomplish this. So ultimately, I want the front face of that red to match up with the front face of that white. Let's try that. So I'm going to actually start with a flush. I could actually take 2 surfaces and make them come into contact with each other. That would be totally fine. But again, like I said, there's more than one way to do this. So if I go flush, that just means this front face and this front face should align. So I'm going to apply that and then cancel this just so I can see what happened. So clearly I don't have these guys locked together, but if we notice, the front face of the red and the front face of the white are now in alignment. Another face that I'd like to see flush together would be the ends of these things. So let's try that and see how close that gets me to locking these two pieces together. So if I go that piece and lock them in, let's press apply and see now what we've got. So now that face and that face are flush. The front face and the front face are flush. So now I really need to mate two faces together in order for these guys to lock together. So let's just take fairly obvious like that face and underneath of the red. Let's see if we can mate those guys together. So now I come over here and click the other one called a mate. I'm going to take that face right there, and then I'm going to just take a look underneath and go that face. And then you hear this click on the computer that indicates a constraint has been executed. So let's take a look at where we're at now. So I've got two pieces that are fixed together. They have been constrained and assembled together using several mates and flushes that I could always edit by coming into here and taking a look at what would happen. So if I ever wanted to get rid of one, I could just go here and I can right click and delete that if I ever needed to modify it. All right, let's keep going. We want to bring in let's come in with a blue piece. So now that I have the two pieces assembled in my assembly file, the blue piece, that block is going to actually come into this gap right here, the one that's sticking down. So let's take a look at the blue piece right there. There's a piece sticking down on blue, and it's going to come into the gap for the red. So onto my assembly, I'm going to go place, and I'm going to bring in the piece that we've labeled blue piece. This is where it's handy if you've labeled these things or named them something logical. So again, what's my orientation for my blue piece? Looks like that L shape is going to be on the top. So I want to rotate this thing. I'm going to try to rotate it about X. Let's see what that does. And again, just tinker with it and see if you can think through. If you can think through what your rotations are doing, that's outstanding. And then I'm going to rotate it about Z. To rotate it, let's click that down. I'm thinking that that's what I wanted. So an X and a Z. And now I have this piece that's going down, and it's going to fill in the gap right beside the red piece there. So how could I do that? I want to flush out the face that's right there on that small face to the front face of the assembled cube. Let's try that. So I'm going to press on constrain. I'm going to flush. Let's go flush and flush. I apply it. I'm going to move things around just to see that those faces are now in alignment, and that's where the piece is eventually going to go. Notice that the top face of these things is not flushed, so let's try that. I'm going to take that front top plate and that top plate and flush it. Notice what happened in flipping me upside down. I'm going to press cancel. I'm going to press cancel because clearly that was not what we wanted to see happen. Some assemblies have a quick fix for that where you can rotate it, but in this, let's just try something different. All right, let's try a mate. I'm going to try to mate. Let's see. Let's go with the inside face there to that face. So let's try this where I'll have to rotate it in a moment. I'm going to try to mate that face with the other side of the blue. So if I take a look at this face, those two need to come into contact. Let me bring that back out. So now if I take my piece, I'm still not quite done, but I'm super close. Now that I've got the mate done, let's try that top flush again so that we know it can't be rotated upside down. So if I go flush here and flush there and press apply, we've got our third piece completed in the assembly. All right, back to the image. The next piece that I'm going to try to bring in is my green. Notice that if I bring it in this orientation, I'm going to slide it in underneath. So let's bring it first in the orientation that we see in this image, and then we'll rotate to the back side to see if we can see how we can mate or flush that thing into place. So on Inventor, I'm going to bring my green piece into the puzzle. And then let's take a look at what we're trying to do in our rotations. So on Inventor, let's see, if I were to rotate that thing about my y-axis, it would look like that. And then I'm thinking I'm going to try, let's try what would happen if I went along x. Did that twice. Let's see, I'm going to go, this one's not as straightforward for me. You're not hurting anything by tinkering with it a bit. And then let's see, I want another x. Let's try an x. So finally, after thinking with that one for a bit, I've got it in the orientation that my image suggested would be a convenient way to recognize how it's sliding into the puzzle. So let's use that. I eventually want this front face on green to flush out with this face on the puzzle. So let's try to constrain that and see if we get the right orientation. If I go flush, flush, and apply it, I can now see that the part is partially met. And let's go underneath so we can just see some faces here. I want this face to slide in and make contact with the white face on the lowest level. So let's try a mate and take that face and make it come into contact with that face. So mate, notice those two faces just slap together. And then ultimately I want to flush out my bottom face. So if I flush them out, let's see if we're done. So if I rotate around on the bottom level, I'm thinking that we're close. Let's finish it with the final piece. So again, back to my orientation, I'm looking for orange. Let's bring in orange. Let's bring in orange into the orientation that you see there. If you were to make your part puzzle pieces and orient them first before you brought them in here, it'd actually make life a little easier if you're comfortable doing it that way. So my orange piece has the top piece rotated about Y. So let's see, is that right? I don't know if that's quite right yet. Let's do a couple Y rotations. Now I have it. And let's try it one more time. I think we finally made it there after a couple Y rotations. So I've got this L shape that's a little bit tricky to figure out how that's coming into my puzzle. But again, the picture is indicating the direction. So this knob right here is going to stick inside the puzzle. There's actually a hole back there that piece is going to fit into, and then that 2 wide block is going to lock into there. So let's take an angle so I can identify some faces. So it looks like there's going to be a fairly obvious mate that happens between this face of my green and the part of it that's hidden. So let's just find those two and try that mate. So if I come in here and identify that face and mate it with that face, we can see that that slaps together. Let's kill that and just move it around and see that we're in the right, we're on the right track. It's not done yet. So let's do a double flush. Again, I could do another mate, but there's more than one way to accomplish this. Let's try the flush on the outside. So that base needs to align to that base. Let me change orientation so we're convinced that that flushed out. So flush just means in alignment. And then let's see, underneath, what's not flush? So the bottom is not flush. So one last flush, apply it, and we are good to go. We've just assembled the puzzle on Inventor.